couple thousand years ago, Jesus was quizzed by a legal expert as to what was the most important, the greatest of the commandments of law, and Jesus didn't hesitate. He responded right away to love God with your heart, your mind, and your soul. But then he slipped in a second commandment, and he said it is like unto the first, nearly the same, and that is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. On another occasion, another legal expert had a follow-up question and said, so, Master, then who is my neighbor? And Jesus responded with the story, the parable of the Good Samaritan. My name is Matt Hahn. I'm a parishioner here at Sacred Heart. I'm here with Gene Summerlin and Dakota Stock to share some of the things that are going on at Sacred Heart to address the challenges that Jesus issued with that second commandment of loving your neighbor as you love yourself. About 3 years ago, through efforts of parishioner Nancy Hemestath and Father Dave, a social justice committee was formed, and shortly after that, it became clear that subcommittees or teams were going to be needed to address some of the specific focuses and some of the specific passions of the parishioners that were on that committee. And Jean, who was the co-chair or the chair of the immigration team that was formed, Dakota was the chair of the green team that was formed, and myself, I'm the chair of the neighborhood alliance team that was formed, are here to kind of share some things that we've been doing as a parish to be better neighbors for those nearby and for those other neighbors that we may come across on the road of life. Jean, did you want to start by sharing?
Sure. So the immigration and refugee team really started out of a Generations of Faith presentation that the Social Justice Committee put on, I don't know, a year and a half
ago, something like that.
We had a number of immigrants come in and talk about their experience. And as a result of the stories that we heard, there were a number of people in the parish that felt like we needed to become more involved. Initially, what that looked like was just trying to get educated. And again, remember at the time that we're doing this, DACA was an issue. We had significant political differences about what was taking place on the border and how we were treating people who were attempting to come into the United States. And so as a group of about 4 or 5 people, we started looking at what are the needs in Omaha and in our community, what are other groups that are already out there doing, and where are there kind of holes that need to be filled. Interestingly, what started with 4 or 5 people at Sacred Heart then turned into a group of about 30 people that involved not only Sacred Heart, but Immigration Allies, the Immigration Legal Network, a number of other churches and organizations within Omaha. And we all came together as a group to start trying to figure out what things can we do to address immigration and refugee issues in the Omaha community.
Yeah, and those Generations of Faith, we were talking about that earlier. The Social Justice Committee put on that Generations of Faith. They did another one on racism. And out of those, like you said, that they're powerful. Listening to the stories of those speakers made it personal. They had, I can't think of the sister who had been on the border for years, came and shared. So yeah, I was at that. It was really powerful. Yeah. And Dakota, the green team, tell us why is it called green team?
So many reasons. As I was telling them, I'm learning as well within this group and talking about all these groups. I joined the parish about a year ago, and at that time I was kind of going through a lot of realizations and realizing that our planet, there are different things happening that scientifically are different, than what has happened before the past century or so. And so I was kind of in this, what people call now eco-anxiety phase. I was really stressed, and so I was trying to get involved in every way I could. And when I signed up to be on the parish, I saw that there were the social justice teams, and I saw that there was a green team. So I was like, well, that must only mean that we do eco-friendly things. So I ended up joining it, and it was incredible. The first night I went down into the bottom of the office over there. And I walked in, and there was about a group of 8 or so parishioners there. And it just felt so welcoming right away. Like I felt so welcome. And they were talking about all the things that I was worrying about and caring about. And it honestly for me was incredible to see, people older than I was worried about the same things. Because I think in my time, in my life, I thought it was mostly younger people because this is the earth that we'll have within a few decades. But it wasn't. It was all of these very intellectual, knowledgeable people that were older than I was. And so I was super tuned in and super excited. And so right away we started putting out action items, like what can we do, within our waste stream? What can we do within, how do we get our electricity? Is it all fossil fuel based? Can we do any kind of solar power? I mean, within the environmental array, there's a total number of things that we can do to kind of change our way and be better, whether that's plastic pollution or education or, like I said, electricity. I mean, there's literally so many things. So we just right away started getting to it. And now I know that we're getting composting within the school, composting within the church, making sure what sort of disposables that we use are compostable rather than plastic or styrofoam. And then we also, every time there's a big event, we're trying to get involved so that we can make sure that all the waste products are being streamlined into the right categories and just having it more organized, as well as educating people so that it can become more of a norm in society, that when we go to throw away something, it's not just being thrown away, because there shouldn't be any waste. We're trying to make it a cycle instead of just a linear system, right? Because everything that we use are resources. And so I think in the green team, we're just trying to focus now in all of our meetings, both reading up on what's the newest scientific technology that we can utilize, that we can afford, as well as what can we do to educate parishioners. So there's a lot going on. We're thinking about putting out a newsletter every month to show both what the community in Omaha is putting out, because there are really so many great groups here in Omaha. And so through a newsletter, we can put out all the different events and groups so that everyone in the parish can know what's going on, but also to keep you up to date on what we're doing, what action items, and how we're trying to inform ourselves on how to better our parish to really the betterment for our common home, which I think about 5 years ago when Pope Francis put out the Laudato Si, and he really brings together a lot of scientific knowledge on what's going on. I think that was really the push, to start to get churches and people to start to understand that this isn't just a political thing, this isn't whatever it's been in the past, like this does concern everyone. And so once we can get all the different communities, churches, organizations, businesses involved, it won't be such a scary thing anymore. So I think that the fact that Sacred Heart has such a focus on this, and there's about 8 of us in the group right now that are working hard, and it can always grow, so we're happy to have more people join, as I'm sure your groups are too. It's just, there's so much to do, there really is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important, this video is an important piece of that, and you're speaking of, creating a newsletter. One of the things that I think is important is that we let parishioners know what we're doing so they can, one, be aware of it. Because I know in regard to some of the things we've been doing, people have come to us and we have some people almost not working against, doing multiple groups doing the same thing. So understanding that there's already groups in place doing these things, but also then to create that awareness so if they want to join, if that is something that they're interested in, they weren't aware of that was an outreach. By this video, by having a newsletter, rather than just, occasional bulletin notice, that it becomes part of the conversation. Everybody knows what's going on. They're aware that the last parish festival was a zero waste event, and that was a big deal. And I know Father Davis talked about getting a dishwasher at this school, so no longer throwing styrofoam. So, but unless you're on your team, or unless you're on the immigration team, and you don't know that. So communicating that, and this video is one piece of that. I think that's important stuff.
And I think it's important too, like, if people have an interest in one of the social justice committees, contacting the church office. We've had a number of people that, have got hold of Kathy and said, hey, I'm interested in immigration issues. And then, it's easy to incorporate them into the group. Because the one thing about, I think, all of our groups is we want more people. We want more people to be involved. We want to be able to spread the word out, So, the groups are very welcoming.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're a perfect example of how rewarding they are. That people they're going to join a group because they're passionate about it or they have an interest in it. But in doing the work and going to the meetings and following the action, the level of fulfillment and satisfaction and reward is just tangible. It's the meetings, they're action based. It's not a lot of theorizing and we're doing stuff, we're putting together plans, we're putting together events, you're working with other groups, other organizations. Yeah, it's and when people join the groups, that response is pretty much across the board of this is good stuff. And it's just that idea of making sure that all the parishioners are aware of what we're doing is a challenge. And this is one of those things that make that happen.
Yeah. And truly what builds engagement is hope, and that's what each of these groups I think are doing, is building that hope and taking away so much fear, because there really is so much good still going on, and so putting out newsletters and different ways for people to hear what we're doing, I think is also huge.
And if what you hear about immigration is the hordes of, the groups coming and being able to really know what immigration is, or, that's I learned a new word, eco-anxiety, but finding out that there's ways you can assuage that anxiety by doing something about it. That's a great way. And it's not the faith part and the action part are one and the same.
And even with the challenge of the pandemic, I know, like, for our group, we formed, shortly before, we all had to start quarantining. And, we had plans. We'd already scheduled a rally at Memorial Park. We had speakers. We had food trucks. The city had given us permission. We had a group that was planning on going down to El Paso to work with an aid agency at the border. And, ultimately, all those plans got scrapped. And, we went from meeting together and you get to know new people from all these different groups. And now we have Zoom meetings. And, but even in the midst of that, we're still able to accomplish good things. Last week we had a TPS tour come in for people that were under temporary protected status. There was a recent Ninth Circuit case that may allow the administration to eliminate TPS. And it was a chance, even if people only participated virtually, but to hear the stories of people that came in from countries that have been devastated either through a natural disaster or political oppression, and when you get to hear people kind of explain, here's my experience, it gives you a different view of okay, our immigration policy makes a difference in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just something you read about in the newspaper and it's just law or legislation. It's something that is life-changing, either positive or negative.
Yeah, it reignites the flame every time, right?
Yeah.
Especially, you can read it, but it's so much different than seeing the actual human being who went through that.
Yeah, just listen to you. I'm going to make a guess that maybe a year ago you didn't have the level of knowledge and understanding of immigration that you have now.
It's certainly, it's more now.
Yeah.
My experience before, I had spent a lot of time working in aid.
Mm-hmm.
And that was over a course of 10 years was pretty life-changing for me. Just recognizing that I hit the birth lottery. I was born in the United States. I was born to a middle-class family. I'm a white male. I watched two guys in Haiti digging a well with what looked like a pie pan and a piece of rebar. And just, watching the day after day as like you couldn't see their heads anymore. They're down. You know, like they were working so much harder than I've ever worked, and it was an understanding of like, you know, I can't take credit for the fact that I was born here with all these advantages that aren't available to so many people. That informs our kind of view of the world when we start recognizing that we are not inherently better than others. I don't want to get overly political, but you know, we have been blessed through a historical and geographic and natural resources situation in this country with wealth that compared to many other nations, people will never see. And the way we treat others in the world says a lot about who we are. And if we're not willing to share the resources and the wealth that we've been given through circumstance, that says something about us.
And I think that cuts right back to the opening, which is who's our neighbor. And the team that I'm the chair of focuses on people across the street. But that story of the Samaritan, the neighbor is anybody in need, regardless of where they are, and regardless of who you are and where you are. So that's a perfect segue of those following the teachings of Christ and doing the right thing. They just kind of come together. And the Neighborhood Alliance team, as the name implies, that we were the first team to form, and the purpose is to develop a presence in the Sacred Heart Parish and North Omaha, which historically Sacred Heart has not focused on. And the very first thing the Justice Committee did, and it was under Father Dave's guidance, it was the 100th anniversary of St. Benedict the Moor Church, which is our neighbor church on 25th and Grant. And that parish was formed 100 years ago for Omaha's Black Catholics. It was a segregated Catholic church. And the chapel that we're sitting in right now, 100 years ago, a small group of Black Catholics, at the invitation of the pastor of Sacred Heart, met here. They were not welcomed into the parish, but they were allowed to use this chapel as a meeting place for a short period until the parishioners of Sacred Heart complained about them they overrode the decision of the pastor and asked that group not be allowed to use this chapel anymore. Shortly after that, St. Benedict the Moor was opened as a mission parish for Black Catholics in Omaha. And Father Dave immediately wanted to have, based on that history, the first thing the Social Justice Committee did was have a healing and reconciliation ceremony asking for forgiveness. The Archbishop attended, and a handful of people from St. Benedict's attended, but it was our way of saying we acknowledge what we've done in the past. It was wrong. We ask for your forgiveness. And it made it clear that one of the things the parish could do better at was focusing on creating the neighborhood connections. So the Neighborhood Alliance team has worked. We've gone door to door inviting neighbors to Parish Festival, handing out tickets to the Parish Festival. We've attended meetings of neighborhood associations in the area. We've created and supported and sponsored businesses like the Omaha Star newspaper, the Great Plains Black History Museum, the Unit for Contemporary Art, the 24th Street Business Improvement District, have had events at those organizations to help Sacred Heart parishioners understand the history of North Omaha. And that has been rewarding as a parishioner and as a member of that team, to watch parishioners' vision open rather than driving in, attending church, walking to your car and leaving. Yeah. And wonderful, powerful things happen within the church, but it tended to be isolated. And the more we have events, the more we do outreach, the more people realize that those folks across the street are literally our neighbors, and they need to be invited to our gatherings and be part of our parish, even though they may or may not be members of our parish.
Yeah, it's amazing when you go into a business in North Omaha I mean, Jesse's is a bar on 24th Street. You know, we've stopped in there probably half a dozen times pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it's welcoming. People are glad to have you there. I think there's a part of Omaha that forgets about North Omaha. We don't want to, you know, utilize North Omaha businesses. We don't want to patronize North Omaha businesses. And that's something we've got to get over, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we want to be part of this community. It's just what you said. We can't come down here on Sunday morning, be here for an hour, and then get in our car and leave. And we have our 1 hour in North Omaha.
Mm-hmm. And the time in North Omaha is getting off the freeway, going down Lake Street, turning left on the 24th, turning right onto Binney, and then just reversing that path back to the freeway, back to, and it also, I think, I agree that it's people have forgotten, but I also think there's, to go back to what Dakota shared about the eco-anxiety, there's a level of fear that has been historically perpetuated, taught, believed, instilled about North Omaha. That it's a dangerous place. It's a, you know, and people, if they don't know anything other than that, if they don't know anything other about the caravans and immigration, you know, that's what people will know. And the more you can educate, share, demonstrate that folks are just folks and living in a neighborhood, and we have a Sacred Heart, I believe, has a historical obligation, because if you look at the history of this parish, it's deeply connected to the development of this neighborhood and what it is and what it was before. And so to be able to have people go into businesses, feel comfortable going into businesses and going outside of their comfort zone and doing different things. But to make a connection, what neighborhood in Omaha is more exposed to, you know, lead, health? I mean, environment. I mean, the poor neighborhoods are the most at risk, the most impacted. So we can it's a double combination.
They have focuses, but they're really all doing this.
And immigration may not, but there's the African immigrants that are coming in that are selling, they're impacted by the immigration piece. So all of this works together. And again, it comes down to what Christ said was just as, in fact, the one and the same as loving God is loving neighbor. So if you're doing that, you're doing the first one at the same time. And you don't have to do them separately. Going to church is loving God and working for what it's like, no, going and working for your neighbor is the same as worshiping and doing anything else. And if you're doing stuff to make things better environmentally for people and their children and their grandchildren, and if you're doing something to make things better for people who are fleeing unknown calamity, danger, you're doing that at that same time. And to be with you and to know what you guys are doing is it's just really satisfying to know that you guys are, because how often do you guys meet? It's
roughly once a month.
Yeah, and and that takes a commitment, a level of commitment and time and energy. And when you talk about organizing that event at Memorial Park, that's a lot of lifting for somebody to make that happen. And to put together the waste-free event, that was...
He knows.
That takes a lot of planning, a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
And every action of that is a form of prayer. It's a form of worship. It's a form of following that second commandment that Jesus slipped in on that warrior. Oh, by the way, there's another one you might want to write down. So it's just really, the more we can let people know that we're doing that. Because I've had members of the parish council come to our team and say, what can we do about racism? Because the neighborhood alliance team has kind of been, as the racial situation has become more heightened, has kind of been a group that people reach out to because we have connections and have developed relationships. And they say, we want to do this, we want to do that. It's important to know that there are already groups in place doing things. And and that's even at the parish council level. Those folks aren't aware of what we're doing. And so that idea of a newsletter is one that I think I'll steal. Or maybe social justice committee puts together some type of a thing, and all the teams report out.
Yeah. And we are working on adding that to the website where it's easier to access. This is what each committee or subcommittee is doing. But the thing that, as you were talking, it just hit me. You started out talking about loving your neighbor as yourself, and what does that mean? And I was listening to you, and it just, I was just thinking to myself, when you love someone as yourself, you become part of the same community. And really, with all three groups, that's where our focus is, being one community. And not just with those outside, but bringing more people from the parish itself into those communities.
I'll never forget the day that I came in, and I don't know who put this together, but it was sitting on the seat, and it just said, "We accept," and then there was all kinds of different people. And I took a photo of that, and I posted it to my social media accounts, and I was like, look at this. Because that was at a time when a lot of people, especially my age, were just against different religious entities, And so seeing that just completely calmed me, because that's so important, and that's exactly what we're doing here, is accepting everyone. It doesn't, we're loving everyone as we love ourselves, or our families, or our best friends. It doesn't matter how different you are, it doesn't matter how many tattoos or piercings or, who you love, it doesn't matter, we are just here to be with you.
And that's like we were talking about before we started taping, that's what makes Sacred Heart such a special place.
Yeah.
And as special as it is, and as special as it has been, there's always room for improvement. And what we're doing now is just building on what was already in place and making it better and better.
Yeah. And I don't want to say this as if this will happen to anyone, but I did end up meeting my fiance in a way that we kind of fell in love in this church and in this team. He ended up, a couple weeks after we met, he ended up joining me to these different encounters that we had. And it just kind of went from there. So everything good came out of it.
And proposed in the balcony, right?
Yes, he did.
I didn't know that. That's sweet. Yeah. Another benefit of joining these things. Anything else you want to add as a final wrap up? Something we haven't touched on?
I just think, if you got any interest in serving on a committee, contact one of us, contact the church office. We'd love to have more involvement. And it's a great way to meet more people and to develop relationships and build community within